everyone, welcome to the School of Reverence Summer Lecture Series. This is brilliant. How to Trust Your Innate Worthiness, Lecture 3. And so the first few lectures, I kind of asked you to notice something sticky icky that you're working with that you could directly apply what I'm speaking of in the lectures. Something that takes you away from your own sense of brilliance, from your own sense of worthiness. And I know you got something. So you can go back to lecture 1 to kind of listen to that. And then last week I had kind of opened up what the view of this lecture is, which is a compassionate view. This is a compassion-centered lecture series. And so in lecture 2, I had you kind of contemplate compassionate presence, compassionate exchange. What's the sensation in your body when someone's really, really there for you, acknowledging you, seeing you? What's the sensation in the body when you're really there for someone? And what might it be like to show up in that way for your own self, in that compassionate way from your own self? So that's lecture 2, and it kind of segues into today. Lecture 3, which is operating from the heart. And so I want to just pause for a moment and drop a quote that I often say, my own quote, that folks don't really need more strategies and advice. What they actually need is for us to meet each other heart to heart, for us to be real with each other, honest with each other, have some sense of healthy intimacy with each other. That's what most folks are starving for, and I imagine that's including you. So how do we do that? How do we meet each other heart to heart? And more importantly, how do we meet our own selves with that type of loving kindness? Because that's truly the texture of meeting someone heart to heart. It's the texture of loving kindness, of friendliness towards each other, therefore learning to have a friendliness towards ourselves. That's what operating from the heart means, that we develop a friendliness towards anything that arises for us and anything that might arise in our exchange with others. And so what I have found out over the years, and you can kind of slow this one down, so take a moment and notice how this lands with you. For me, it is curiosity that opens up the pathway back to kindness. So not having resources from my vulnerability, I could say I move towards unkindness, like kind of having a hate on for myself or having a hate on for others. When I can stand vulnerability, then I can move towards loving kindness, towards compassion, towards care. And what I really, really noticed is that if I can be curious, if I can hang with vulnerability enough and get curious about it, then that already, just by being curious of what's happening for me, curious of my vulnerability, I'm already moving towards kindness. As soon as I'm curious, I become more kind. See how that lands with you. And we'll talk about it a lot more in the next lecture. And so what I'd like to do is evoke some curiosity. So sometimes, here's what I know for sure. Trauma, really high stress situations, robs us from our curiosity, actually, because that's just the way the brain's wired. If it's in survival mode, it doesn't want you to slow down and get curious about things. It just wants you to survive the next 5 minutes. So we need to kind of rebuild our curiosity muscle so that we can get back to kindness, so that we can get back to compassion. And so sometimes we need curious friends around us that evoke some curiosity, give us some language around what might be happening for us so that we can get curious. So what I'd like to offer you is some visuals, some language that was offered to me a long time ago that has been really, really helpful and helps me stay in my curiosity state so that I don't go into fully hating myself. Okay, so this is the story, the visual of mouse view versus eagle view. And so, giving full credit where credit is due, this teaching, visual, came to me from someone who was my marriage counselor at the time, who specialized in addiction recovery, as there were aspects of that in my marriage. And this person is a Blackfeet elder. And so he used amazing indigenous imagery to educate me about my nervous system. And that was really, really helpful for me, because I am kind of an image person. If you give me a landscape of some kind, then I can really integrate and absorb what someone's saying instead of a bunch of facts. I get kind of lost with that. But if you give me a beautiful image, so this is the image of mouse view and eagle view. So mouse view, if you consider a little mouse, most of the time they are in high alert, right? They have to be kind of watching out for any predators that might get them. So they're often in fight or flight of some sort. So you can imagine that little mouse kind of scouring around, really getting to know its environment, so it knows when to hide and when to be really, really small and make sure that nothing big sees it. And so that was really helpful for me to put an image to my fight or flight response, my freeze response, all of the aspects my nervous system goes in. So when I'm in a trauma response or stress response, I'm in mouse view, right? I'm really, really small, and my view is constricted, and it's just looking out for what might harm me. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a mouse and being in mouse view. If you're in mouse view, if I'm in mouse view, it's probably an appropriate response from the nervous system saying, like, this is your environment right now. Like, you got to be watching out, right? So mouse view is not a problem. It's a state we go in. It's a view that we go in. What happens though in mouse view is that because we're really scanning out for all the things that might harm us, it kind of gives us a false sense of our landscape, our environment. It makes it, because we're hyper focusing on all of the things that are harmful or that are going wrong, it makes it feel like everything in our life is harmful or going wrong, right? And that there's barely anything going right, or that there's barely anything of benefit. But that is an skewed, distorted perspective that mouse view has, because it has such a little narrow view. So it only sees so much. And so knowing that is helpful. If right now it feels like everything in my life is going wrong, that there's not very much benefiting me, what might be possible is that I'm in mouse view. That's that curiosity kicking in. Oh, I'm in mouse view. And so eagle view, you can kind of get a sense from being really small to being up high above the clouds, and really seeing the whole perspective of things going on. So yes, there's this little mouse down below that can only see so much, but then there's so much more in that landscape. You have that whole big perspective, and a much more compassionate view there than mouse view that's always really, really freaked out. And so that image was really, really helpful to start asking myself, am I in mouse view right now? And if I am, what resources do I have around me to get in eagle view? How can I find myself in eagle view so that I can have better discernment of what's going on, and so that I can really actually see all the resources that are there? What's really cool about curiosity is, even though you might be in mouse view for a while, as soon as you're curious about mouse view, you're suddenly in an eagle view of your mouse view. I don't know if that makes any sense. So let's slow that down and just take in this aspect of mouse view being in survival mode, and eagle view being in a broader perspective of discernment and compassion, and check in with what view are you in right now? And what capacity what resources, what capacity do you have to get an eagle view, to get a broad perspective? And what might be needed in your life right now to be able to access eagle view a little bit more? I just want to give you a really simple exercise for this week. I'm just keeping it all simple right here because we get into things a lot more in the embodied wonderment method, but for now, let's keep it simple so that I can offer you things that you can actually try and do. So I was thinking about how do I start developing a friendliness towards myself? Because that friendliness towards myself is propelling me into ego view, right? The more that I can develop loving kindness for myself, the more often and longer I find myself in ego view. And so this one is super duper simple. It's like one of the simplest breathing exercises I've ever learned, and it's been really helpful. And I'm thinking of this one because it was recommended to me because I was diagnosed with hyperventilation syndrome. What happens when our body's in a lot of stress for a long amount of time is that we can start hyperventilating without knowing. So you might even hear it throughout this video because I've been slacking off on my proper breathing, but I take like sips of air all of the time, which ends up feeling like to my body like I'm hyperventilating. So when we're in mouse view, we're more likely to have these mini hyperventilations throughout the day. And see, I just did it there. Mouse of air. And so I thought I would offer you a breathing exercise that I learned to counteract, to reduce the amount of hyperventilation I was doing throughout the day. And so this was learned from Buteyko breathing, a Buteyko breathing coach, facilitator. And it's just called reduced nose breathing. So it's to reduce this sense of hyperventilation. And so what's most important is that we're breathing in and out through our nose, not through our mouth. And that we're kind of slowing down after the exhale. So here's how it goes. It's really simple. 1, shut your mouth. 2, inhale naturally, whatever your natural inhale is through your nose. 3, exhale naturally through your nose. And 4, before you inhale again, count to 2. 1, 2, and then inhale again. And then repeat. And so you could do that for as long as you want. Try it out any time of the day. Sprinkle it throughout your day and see what happens. Especially if you found yourself like, oh shit, I'm in mouse view right now. My view is so narrow, I can't really see anything around me. And try that breathing exercises just to slow down any of that hyperventilation, stress response. And let me know how that goes. And so again, when I consider trusting that I'm damn brilliant and resourcing myself through hard things so that I don't lose that trust in my own worthiness, that trust in my own brilliance. These types of pauses, this type of care throughout the day really, really helps me move towards loving kindness. And again, after you try this breathing exercise, let yourself be curious for a moment. Like, how do I feel after that? And again, as much times throughout the day as you can be curious is the amount of times that you're allowing yourself to move back towards some form of loving kindness. Let me know how this lands with you. Thank you for playing along. We need each other. We need each other kind. I'm not going to pretend it's not tough out there. It's tough out there for so many folks. And so this movement back to kindness is really, really important. So let me know your little moments of kindness this week. Let me know how eagle view and mouse view lands. And really take note when you're in one and how you access the other. You know? Okay, Sending you lots of love.